Okay, so looking back at this code, so the first question in the exit ticket was, what will happen when the browser loads the HTML below? Select all that apply. Actually, let's do it as the real thing. Do it here. Preview. And we have this. And the question is, what will happen when the browser loads the HTML below? In this case, we have an HTML tag. Then inside that, we have a body tag. Inside that, we have a console.log. We close the body tag. We close the HTML tag. Then the options are: it will not log anything to the console. It will log this console to this console. This is a console message to the console, or it will display a blank screen, or it will display console log. This is my console message on this screen. So, thumbs up if you think it will not log anything to the console. Let's look at the code again. So this one has it select all that apply. So sort of like now that we're in the HTML and DOM topic, these are checkboxes. Checkboxes are mostly made so that you can select more than one. And radio buttons are made so that you can select only one. I'm not sure. Yeah, so here, for instance, we have radio buttons. That's when you want to select only one option. So now that we're on that topic. So thumbs up if you think it will, if you want me to select, it will not log anything to the console. Okay, 4, 5. Okay, about 10. Okay, so there's anyone from those that did thumbs up wants to give his or her argument for why will not log anything to the console. Alessandra?
Because it needs to be the script tag.
Correct. It will, for JavaScript code to execute on an HTML, that JavaScript code needs to be inside a script tag. Great. Cool. So let's do, it will log, well, so we know that it will not log anything, so we discard this. It will display, who says it will display a blank screen? 1. Thumbs up if you think it's going to display just a blank screen, a blank page. Okay? Thumbs up if it will display console log, this is my console message, on the screen. Okay? Where is the rest? I see like 10 people said it will display this to the screen, and I see some of you that didn't vote. So let's try this out. So these two are the correct ones. It will not log anything because, as Alessandra said, the code needs to be inside the script tag. And then if code is not inside the script tag, what will happen is that code will just be interpreted not as code, but as just regular HTML text. So for testing this, we could do that. We could open here about blank. I'm going to go to the inspector tools, then elements, edit as HTML, select all these and paste that code here, and I hit enter, and we see, oops, that we have only this text in the page, right? And we don't have anything in the console. So the two correct answers here were it will not log anything to the console, and it will display console log, this is my message, on the screen. That's what we're seeing here. Any questions or comments on this one? Cool. Let's do the second one. Fill in the blanks to make a pop-up appear that accepts a user input. Then display that number back to the user in another pop-up. So let's see. So we have an HTML tag starts here, a head tag starts here, and we have a blank. Then we see some JavaScript, let username equals something that is going to be followed by a parenthesis, then something else that is going to be also followed by a parenthesis, and then something else. So remember that here the goal is to prompt the user for some input and then display that back as a pop-up. What were the two things that we saw that fill those descriptions? How can we prompt something? How can we prompt the user for user input? So is that window.prompt. That's correct. So window.prompt. And that also makes sense since we see that window.prompt is a function, and we call a function, we invoke the function with parentheses, right? And inside those parentheses, we put a string that is the message that we want the user to display, or the prompt, right? And even before we do that, we seem to be writing JavaScript here inside HTML. How can I write? What's the only way in which I can write valid JavaScript inside HTML? If it's inside, the script tag. So that will start here, and it will probably end in the last one. Script. Great. Okay, so we prompt the user for some input, and then we save that to a variable called user_num. And then the question also says, display that number back to the user in another pop-up. So what's that other tool that will allow me to display something to the user? Deja? Window.alert. Right? And we don't have to include here parentheses because they are already given to you under here. Window.alert, again, is a function that takes in a string, and in this case, it will display your favorite number is whatever the user typed in as number. Any questions on this one? Cool. What will happen if we remove the script tag again? Yes, Leja?
It won't run it. It won't do anything because that's the only time we can run JavaScript inside of HTML.
Correct. The JavaScript will not run, and what's the second part to that? It will display, but where it will display? Just like this. It will display your code like that, right?
I don't think so because it's
Oh, that's a good observation. So because it's in the head, it might not display. Let's try that. Let's put this piece of code instead of the body. Let's put it in the head. Oh, I put it in the head, but the browser moved it to the body. Let's look at that again. I'm cutting that text from the body. I'm going right-click on the head and then edit as HTML. And then I'm pasting here, and then I'm pressing Command-Enter to finalize my edit, and the browser moves it to the body. That's just the browser being handy, saying, "Oh, you put raw text. You put raw text here. You probably meant to put it in the body. I'm gonna do that for you." Sometimes that can be confusing, right? Okay, cool. Let's see what else. Here, what will happen when a browser loads the HTML below? We have HTML tag, body tag, no head tag in this case. We have a paragraph. That paragraph has an ID with the string para. And then that paragraph has inside the word hello. Then after that we have a script. that properly opens and properly closes. Then we have a variable called letParam_element that is going to be equal to the document.getElementById, and then we pass in the string para to the getElementById function, and then we have window.alert. We call the alert method in the window object with the para element. What are we going to see here? Are we going to see object HTML paragraph element in the pop-up? Are we going to display an alert with object HTML paragraph element? Are we going to display an alert message with hello, an alert message with undefined, or an alert with para? Who says we're going to get a display alert with hello? Thumbs up. Okay, a few of you. Thumbs up if you say it's going to display an alert with object HTML paragraph element. Some of you had this one correct. So here we had a mistake, which these two are actually the same option. So if you mark one of these two and you got it wrong, no worries. The canvas was regraded. Oh yeah, by the way, that's Ben Stone. He's head of curriculum.
I make mistakes like that. That's what I do.
Right.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, Ben is the one that makes the curriculum possible. So thank you. So yeah, again, if you selected one of these two and it told you that you were wrong, no worries, because Canvas will regrade you because we marked out as correct. So, okay, so let's see. Some people thought it was going to display hello, but let's actually see. Copy this again from here. Go to my blank page. Right-click on the HTML. Edit as HTML. Erase that. Paste what I have, and then command return to start. Oops. Oh, I think I didn't copy. Copy from here. Oops. Okay, let's just refresh this. So, okay. We see hello in the screen, which is correct, but it doesn't. The hello is not in the alert. The hello is in the page itself as a paragraph, right? And we didn't see the alert because when I'm copying and pasting here, the alert is not happening. So I'll need to do. Let's do this quickly. Paste that here. Save it. HTML. And then open. Now, the first thing that we see is object HTML paragraph element. So that will be option number 1 and 2. Right? And after I click OK, I see the hello in the screen. Any questions on this one? Do you guys remember when we were trying to console log, when we were trying to like concatenate a string with an object, that sometimes it will convert the object to a string and it will display correctly. In this case, when we do this, let's do this. Here, where we have the parameter element, is an object. It's a really big object, has a bunch of properties and a bunch of methods. And then window.alert is going to try to convert that object to a string, but because it sees that it's so big and it doesn't want to do that much work, it just shows you this object that it shows you I have an object that is going to be an HTML paragraph element. So again, in this case, we had these two were correct, 1 and 2. Any questions on this one? The code will be this one. Mm-hmm. If we wanted to alert the actual text hello, could we have done that with this piece of code? Like, what would we need to change in this piece of code to actually alert hello? Yeah.
Should we document element
So here, document the element. This is the same code. But instead of that alert showing me object and then that, what if I actually want to show the content of the paragraph? Bunil?
You put paragraph element inner text.
I could just access the inner text property of the parent element object. And if I go back to the browser, where is my window? I refresh this, now we get hello. Because we are now keying into the parent element, grabbing in the inner text property. And that's the one that actually has the content. Great. Cool, let's look at the fourth one. How do you get the text inside an input element? So this one is tricky. Because you may think, oh, I was able to grab the text of inside this paragraph by saying inner text, right? So let's try that one in here. Instead of a p tag, I'm going to have input type text like that. Now I'm going to get, I need an ID. Let's call it name. Because they're going to type in a name there. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to call this input. And now let's alert the input. What are we going to see here? So I have an input tag. It's going to be of type text. And I want it to hold a name. I want the user to be able to type a name here. The next thing that I want to do is I want to grab that input with document get element by ID, and then I'm going to alert that input. I'm going to try to display, but what are we going to see here? Have we seen what is about to happen before? So thumbs up if you think is going to display the input first, and then it's going to show you an alert with, and where inside you have the string name. So thumbs up if you think it's going to give you an alert, and inside that alert you're going to see the text name. Okay? Thumbs up if you think you are going to see an alert that is going to say input HTML input element, or object HTML input element. Okay, I get some more thumbs up. That's good, because then you're remembering the first, the second question, where you were trying to alert the entire paragraph, and it showed you like object HTML paragraph element. So let's try it all again. Refresh. Now we get object HTML input element. We're asking the browser to show something that is too complex, and that for a regular user that doesn't make sense, right? And then the browser just says, I'm just going to show you this small thing, because I don't think you really wanted to display all that. Okay, so we get that, and then we get the text input. And here I can type any name, to put my name. But now, let's say I want to type this name. And actually, let's change the question a little bit. How can I have this input be pre-populated with some content inside. We saw this in one yesterday, I think. Douglas?
So at the input tag, after ID, no, after type,
Okay.
you would add value equals, I guess, quotations and whatever you want to have that
Pre-populated with. So that's correct. Input has an attribute called value that you could give it a specific value, specific string, and that is going to be, that input is going to be pre-populated with such content. So now let's try to go back to our browser and refresh the page. We still have the alert, and then we have John. So, okay, so we were looking at if we were able to grab the inner text of the paragraph that had hello, and we were able to alert that. Let's see what we have if we try to do the same here. Input that inner text. Are we going to get John, or are we going to get maybe undefined or null? I mean, probably an error or undefined. Let's say this page says nothing. There is no content at all. Okay, so that's not the right property to grab the value of the input. Any suspicions as to if we were able to add pre-populated with an attribute called value, what should this key be or property, right? Value as well. Well, let's see that. Now it says John. Even before the input actually appears, the input internally already has the value John in it. Now we got that. So another thing, another way to think about this is when we have a paragraph, we have an opening and a closing tag, right? What is inside of that tag we call the inner text. But do we have anything inside an input as to the way that we have something inside a paragraph? No, right? Because we don't have a closing input tag. That doesn't make sense for HTML and the browser, right? So nothing goes inside. Then we have value for that. Again, in here, inner text will be what is inside the tags, the opening and closing tag, and input doesn't have an opening and closing tag. An input is what is called as a self-closing tag. No need for a closing. And therefore, it doesn't have an inner HTML or an inner text. It has a value. The content that you type in will be in a property called value. Any questions or comments on this one? Suggestions? Cool. So let's see, I think that was the last one. Yep. So this one will be, how do you get the text inside an input element? That value. Great. Okay, so now what we're going to do is similar to what we did yesterday. We are still going to be doing stuff with the DOM. We're going to see another way of grabbing elements from the DOM. We're also going to see how can we create those elements from within JavaScript and put them in the DOM. We're going to see how to replace elements as well as remove elements directly from the DOM. Okay, so do you remember yesterday and even here, we were using getElement by ID. Right? And we were grabbing an element that was in the HTML, in the DOM, that match that ID, right? But what if the element doesn't have an ID? Just all attributes in HTML are optional. So what if it doesn't have an ID? Yes, Chara?
You can't manipulate it or grab it.
A little bit louder?
You can't manipulate it or grab it.
Correct. So you would think that we cannot grab it, we cannot manipulate it. Or at least we can't get element by ID.
That's what I mean.
Right? So because this input doesn't have an ID, we will not be able to grab it with get element by ID. But the people who build the browser and the HTML and JavaScript standard decided, oh, let's allow for more flexibility. Let's have another function that is able to grab element by other attributes. Those other attributes could be even the name of the element or the name of the tag, which is input. It could be the ID if we wanted to, and it could be the class as well. So that function they named Query Selector. So Query Selector is a function similar to document get element by ID. It's similar. And Query Selector is a function that takes in a string, just like get element by ID, but this string is what the web standard calls a selector. And a selector can be the name of a tag, an ID, or a class name. We haven't seen class names yet. So you can remember that Query Selector can receive a string that is going to be the name of the input, that is the name of the tag, and or an ID. So for grabbing, actually let's leave this one here for contrast, and let's uncomment this. That was get element by ID. So now we don't have an ID in the input, but I still want to grab it. I could do that if I do Query Selector, and because I don't have an ID, then I cannot use an ID to grab it. But I could use the tag name. What's the tag name that I want here? Input. Text will be the type. So I could just pass input. And I will be able to grab it like that. So let's experiment with that one here. Still have the same input. John, and we can see that our code still works as if we had get element by ID. Yes, Malik. Oh, that's a good question. What happens if you have more than one? Like, then would it grab the first one or the second one? Let's say this one is a number, and then the value will be, let's say this is the age, so it will be, say, 30. So let's see. So here the question is, with get element by ID, we could grab one specific element because that element had one unique ID. But now we're trying to grab an element by the tag name, and then there are two inputs. So which one would it grab first? Jonathan?
First one?
The first one. That's a good guess. Let's verify. So we're having one will have John as the value, the other one will have 30. Let's see which one appears here in the alert. Refresh this, and we get John. So as Jonathan suggested, is grabbing the first one. The first one, basically you could imagine this query selector. Do you guys remember the tree that we saw yesterday? where the document is at the top, then the head, the body has all the other elements. This document, that query selector, is going through that tree, and once it finds the first match, which is the first input, it stops, and it just returns you that. It doesn't continue. Okay, so this is how we could grab that element by the tag name. Right? Now we have, again, this other tool that is more flexible, would allow us to grab elements by tag name, IDs, or classes. And in reality, this will allow us to grab any element with any attribute that we want specifically as well. Once we get to CSS, we're going to see more selectors, more ways in which we can find elements in the DOM. One such way, so that's to give you an idea, I could grab the input that is of type number if I wanted to. There's a selector that I could use that will give me the input of type number. Okay, let me see what else do we have here. Any questions regarding this one? I mean?
So in this case, if you want to grab the second one, you have to use the ID.
Say that again?
If you want to get the second type, the second input, you have to use the ID. No other choice.
No, I could well, because we haven't seen that, I could also grab an input that is not only an input, but I could specify I want an input that is of type number. So let's look at the documentation for Query Selector. Document.query selector. So the document method selector returns the first element within the document that matches the specified selector or group of selectors. If no matches are found, null is returned. Then we have the signature selectors, and then it says what a selector is. It's a DOM string containing one or more selectors to match. The string must be valid CSS selector string. So yeah, that's something that we haven't seen. That the way that we're grabbing elements from the DOM, like with JavaScript, via selectors, is the same way that we grab them once we want to style them, once we want them to be a different color using CSS. So let's see. There is a good resource that we put in here in the lecture that has this documentation also from the W3 schools. And here they have really good examples as to all the ways in which you can grab elements. So this will grab a P tag, right? This will grab a P tag with class example. This will grab a P tag or an element with the ID demo, and it's going to set the inner HTML. So I wanted to see. Yeah. Any other questions here? Let's see what else. Okay, let's see how we can grab the element not by the tag name, but by the ID that we have initially. So let's do this one name. Let's do this one just age. But now, instead of using get element by ID, we're going to use the query selector. So it says a DOM string. We don't know what a DOM string is, but we know what a string is. Right? So there's just this auto qualifier that's a DOM, a string somehow related to the DOM. So you could click on that link, and then it gives you more information. is a string, as JavaScript already uses strings, is mapped directly to a string, has a null to a method or parameter accepting dump string, typically signifies to null. Let's see if it gives us some examples. Oh, actually, this one doesn't have any examples. Let's see if the W3 school has examples for that. Syntax. So this one says document that query selector, and the W3 schools, instead of saying like, it says CSS selectors, where MDN just said selectors, right? But that's still the same. It still means the same. Let's see what W3 school says about selectors. Require specifies one or more CSS selectors to match the element. These are used to select HTML elements based on their ID, classes, types, attributes, value of attributes, etc. For multiple selectors, separate them by commas. Let's see this link. Okay, here there are some examples. Here what we just need to remember is that once we want to grab an element by ID, we need to add the, not the ampersand, the hashtag to the ID once we want to grab it. So if we go back to our code, now I want to grab this input with the ID name. I'll need to, instead of grabbing it by tag name, I'll do hashtag name. If I do this, should anything with my code, or should any of the behavior of my website change? Yes? What do you mean? Once you have it by name, it's going to do the same thing. Oh, yes, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to grab the element. Let's look back here. Let's put the code on the side. Where was this? Oh, I closed my. Okay, we have the code here. Nope. Sorry. Done. Here. Okay, we're back on track. We have this code. We just changed query selector. We changed get element by ID by query selector, and now we have to specify a selector. And if we want the selector to be an ID, because we want to grab the element by ID, we need to prepend the ID with the hashtag. So once I go back to my page, besides this, I refresh, I still get John. Everything's still the same. Now, as you're following along, have this select the second input via the ID. Instead of alerting me John, I want it to alert me 30. What do I need to do here? Giselle? Pound sign or hashtag, whatever you want to call it, age. Now let's try that. Save, refresh, we got the second one. Any questions here? Why would I want to use query selector versus element by ID? Get element by ID. Version? Somebody can help Deja. Why would I want to use Query Selector versus Get Element by ID? Yes, Karen?
You don't know the ID.
That's a good point. If you don't know the ID, Query Selector is still able to get elements. Other ideas?
Saying the obvious, but aren't you knowing the ID by looking at the ID?
I think I don't understand.
Well, the ID for input is age.
Oh.
Age.
Yes, but so how does that answer the question? When would I want to change Get Element by ID, or when would I want to? Why would I want to use Get Element by ID versus Query Selector? So one point that Karen mentioned is when you don't have the ID, Query Selector is still able to grab elements by name and other properties. Sure.
The question was, why would you use Get Element by ID instead of Query Selector? That's the question, right?
Say that again.
The question was, why would you use Get Element by ID instead of Query Selector, right?
Oh, I think I might have said that to Cameron. No. So the question is, when would I want to use? Why would I want to use Query Selector instead of Get Element by ID? Yeah, I think I flipped it at some point. Thank you for the correction. So why would I want to use Query Selector? I think the main point is there, which is Query Selector is able to grab by tag name, by ID, and by other properties like class. Yes, Louis.
Can you use string interpolation inside of, like could you use backticks instead of provision like that?
Yes, that's correct. In here, because this is just a regular JavaScript string, I could do anything that I can do with strings. Yes.
So like any, doesn't Get Element ID also grab by ID?
Yes.
Yeah, so what's the difference?
But the advantage of Query Selector is that it's more flexible. It's more. It allows me to grab elements not only by ID, but also by class, by tag name, and others. With Get Element by ID, I can only get the element by ID, which is sort of limiting. Any other questions or comments on this one? Joey?
So you want to grab an ID. Why would you ever want to use queries?
That's a good question. You're sure you want to grab it by ID? then you are free to choose Get Element by ID or Query Selector. When I was reading on this, I found that Query Selector had some improvement in speed, so it somehow was a little bit more efficient. But I don't know the details as to to fully explain that. Any other questions? Yes, Douglas.
If you had an undefined value, like you were waiting for the user to input that value, how would you? I guess you use the $sign, squiggly brackets. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to grab. Like, how would you grab an undefined value?
Well, the thing is like. You mean like if the user input is empty?
Right.
It will still grab it because I'm grabbing the input as a whole. I'm not just grabbing an input that has John on it.
Okay.
And here it will still grab it. It's just that what's the value going to be once we alert if it doesn't have anything pre-populated? This is just like that, empty. And then I'm going to alert. I'm going to grab the input with ID age, and I'm going to grab it and just alert that input value. What am I going to see in the alert? I think I heard it somewhere. Empty string, which we don't see here because it's an empty string. Any other questions on Query Selector? So, but now then, a problem that Malik brought up earlier is, if I have 2 inputs, Query Selector will only get the first one. But what if you actually want them all? Like, what if instead of just one, you want all the inputs? Pupil? That's correct. There is another one that's Query Selector all. So the difference between Query Selector and Query Selector all is that Query Selector will find the first element and return that to you. But we will find the first element that matches your selector, right? But Query Selector all will return to you a list with all the elements that match that selector. In this case, my selector is the tag name input. And I have 2 inputs. So I should be able to see, oh, but then if I'm getting 2 inputs, and I said that is going to be a list, does this name of the variable make sense? Right, the name of the variable now doesn't make sense because now I'm not getting only 1. I'm going to get 2. So let's do inputs because we're getting more than 1. And then because that is a list, and note that I haven't said what kind of list it is. Grab all the inputs and put them in a variable called inputs, and then alert inputs.length. What should we see in the screen once I refresh? 2. We have 2 inputs. So if I do inputs that value, and let's pre-populate this again. I'm doing inputs that value. What am I going to see? What do you think? Somebody going to show? I mean? So okay, that's a good speculation. Maybe we'll alert John and 30. Any other ideas? Sure.
I think it's just John.
Just John? Let's see what we're going to see. Undefined. Why do you think we're seeing undefined? When do we get undefined in general, like in objects, when we're talking about objects? Yes, Douglas?
When the output isn't defined by a variable.
Yes, but in the context of objects, when do we get undefined in the context of objects, when we're talking about objects? When we do length, we get 2. But when we do value, we get undefined. I mean?
Maybe value is not a property of this object?
That's correct. The value is not a property. So inputs here is a list, right? And that list is also an object. And that object has a property length, and that length is 2. But this list doesn't have a property value. What happens when you try to access a property that doesn't exist, that's not even there? You get undefined. Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's inspect this list. If I wanted to look at the list, note that I haven't told you like what it looks like. I'm just telling you that's a list. But what happens if I'm curious and I want to look inside the list? What are some options that I have? Dinesh? Console log. That's a good one. Let's do console.log. Just like when you want to inspect anything in your code. Console log. I'm going to console log inputs. Remember that the console logs that you put in your HTML will appear in the console of the website in the developer tools. So right click, inspect, and then I have console. So this console log should appear in my console here once I refresh. Oh, so one thing that we see is the window that alert is saying object node list. Okay, that, and then we get this. This is our console log. Alert HTML line 11. Alert HTML line 11. Okay, let's look at this. Or just by looking at this, what does this resemble? Why? Yeah, Dejan? You got it. Peter? The square brackets. We have in arrays in JavaScript, we use square brackets, right? So this is an array-like list. It's not really an array because do you remember when we were looking at classes that we could do instance of? So this on the left is an empty array. I can say instance of array that gives me true, right? Because this is a true array. Right? Now let's look at if we do console log inputs instance of array. I want to see if inputs is a true array or not. This is going to give me true or false. It's going to give me true if inputs is an instance of array. False otherwise. Refresh, and then we get false. So this is a demonstration that the inputs is a list like an array. That's an array-like list, but it's not really an array. It's not a full-fledged array. What do you think? Like, what could be the consequences of that? Of node list not fully being an array? What do you think? Like, it's like array-like, but not really. Well, like, maybe you can't look through it. Okay, that's a fair one. We're gonna get to verify that one. Sure. Maybe you can't use array methods. That's a good one too. Any other? I mean,
Would be also like objects, you cannot target the elements inside by the element.
okay, so those are good ones. Those are similar to the one that Malik said about iterating or looping through. Yeah, right. Maybe you kind of push. Maybe you kind of pop. Right. And going back to this, we're gonna verify those in a few minutes. Going back to this. Let's refresh this page. We have object node list. And do you also remember that when we had a dog class, and then we created a dog that was named Pluto and breed cartoon. When we console log that dog, it showed the object, but it also before the object, it showed the class that it was made of. That it was dog in capital D-O-G. Do you guys remember that? So here is the same story. This is the class that this list was made of. Right? Because again, this is where everything, almost everything are objects in here. So here we have, there's internally somewhere, the way that we wrote the class dog, somebody wrote a class code no list. And this is just telling us that you have a list that is of kind node list. And then again, as we were talking, that might have some implications as to maybe we cannot push. So let's play with this in here. Or actually, instead of doing that, let's see. I'm hesitant. Let's try this. I'm going to copy this line. Also, remember that any code that you write inside your page, inside your HTML, you could also write in the console of your browser here. You could take this as a playground. Like, you could write any JavaScript here in the console and explore for yourself. So here I'm just copying this line, the one that gets the element, and I'm going to paste it in my console. So first, let's look at there's something called inputs, because my website has this script, and then everything that I have, every variable that I have in my script becomes available for me to inspect in here. So I could do this, inputs. But I could also do this. Let's do inputs. In this case, we're going to get an error because inputs was already defined. Inputs was defined by my script here on the right. And I'm trying to define it again through the console. So let's get sort of back here. Remember that any code that you write on your HTML, you could also write in your console. For the console is mainly for experimentation. Like if you want something to persist, you don't want to write it in the console because once you refresh, it's gone. Right? You'll put those in your HTML file. So here, every variable that I have in my script will become available also here in my console. So if I do inputs, I get the list. Right? Now we were saying, okay, maybe we cannot loop over it. Let's try. What if we do a for loop? Let I equal to. So here we're going to verify if we can loop over this list. We saw that the list is not truly an array, but maybe because it's array-like, it will allow us to loop. Hit enter, and we get 0 and 1 console log to the screen. So this is to say that then we verify that we can loop over this list, even though it's not truly an array. So you're saying maybe if you have a longer list, maybe we will let you. That's a good point. That's a good point. Amin is arguing, well, this doesn't really demonstrate that this is a list that you can iterate over because you're not accessing the individual elements. I'm just console logging I. So let's do that. That's a very fair point. Let's go back here. Now let's do, instead of console logging I, I'm going to see if this list is also indexed. So I'm going to do the name of the list, inputs, at index I. Just as, in this case, just as if it was an array. Now let's execute this. And we get 2 console logs with 2 inputs. All of them. Any questions here? So what does Query Selector all do? What does Query Selector all do compared to the Query Selector, just Query Selector? Owen? Correct, right. You can get multiple elements that match your selector. In this case, my selector is input. I'm going to select all the inputs. Why would I want to select them all?
Because
That's a good option. So let's say you're building a form and then you want to see, maybe once you submit the form, it's going to show you everything you typed. Instead of grabbing every input individually and then displaying what you type on everyone, you could just grab them all and then have a for loop that displays all the information. And you save yourself having to grab all the inputs individually. You guys remember in the lab there's one exercise which is, I think, get the average of 3 numbers, right? Now with Query Selector all, instead of having to grab every single one individually, you can grab them all and then loop over them and do the average that way. Giselle? We can think of it as in that way. Yes, it was going to create, it's not an array, it's a node list. It's array-like, it's indexed. We discovered that it's indexed. And that array will contain objects. Yes, it will contain the input objects. Look at, if I do, instead of console log, what was the other option that we learned if we wanted to inspect like the properties? Shana? dir. Oops. No. In this case, we get. Oh, I have to do it. I have to do it here. Console. No, I have to do the for loop. Instead of console log, I want to do dir. Now I get 2 input objects, and I get all their properties. So, Giselle, does that answer your question? Cool. Alessandra? So we haven't, so far we haven't seen what the difference is. We just verified that they have something in common, or they have 2 things in common so far. They have the length and their index. I could access any element by the index. This is another demonstration. If I do inputs at index 0, I get the first input. If I do inputs at index 1, I get the second input. So we verified that they're indexed. And somebody else said, maybe you cannot use array methods. So what if we try to do inputs? Inputs has 2 elements. Let's try to do push. Let's push something like hello. What does the error say? Inputs that push is not a function. Then that's one difference. To arrays, you can do push, and you add new elements. To a node list, it's array-like, but you cannot push elements. There is you cannot even map element console.log element. Same error. Input.map is not a function. But you could do, there is one array method that you could use with node lists. Only one. That's for each. E for the element, let's call it just input. console.log input. For each is the only array method you can call on a node list. Yes, Malik?
You know how you can change the elements inside of an array? You can change the elements inside of a node list? Like change the value?
Oh, that's a good question. The question is, can you change the elements inside the node list the way you can change elements inside an array? I don't know, but we can find out. Let's do Control C. Oh. Let's do inputs at index 0, I want to replace that with string hello. Hello. Okay. So that seems to have worked. It didn't remove this John input text and put hello in. But let's inspect our inputs again. What can we tell? So what's the answer to the question, can we modify elements inside the list the way we can modify elements inside an array? We can't, right? We cannot modify elements inside the node list. Yes, sure.
Can you repeat what .dir does?
Yes, dir, the simplest definition is it will console log the JavaScript representation or the object representation of an HTML element. Yes. Because if you do console log, it gives you like this representation, which is the HTML one. You may not want that. You may want to explore all the properties of the input. Cameron?
It's a random question. That value that we're going to look this?
Oh, so you mean, so we tried that value in the inputs list. We saw that the inputs has a length property, but it doesn't have a value property. But what if I want to console log I'm grabbing all the inputs with Query Selector all. What if I want to console log their values, the values that every one of them has? As to say what Bunil's idea was, which is after they completed the form, then you could like show a summary for the review. Have you seen like those? There are some forms online that you fill out and then you click send, and then it shows you like all the information in one page, and it's just like it says, please review, make sure that everything is clear, and then confirm, and then that's sent. Right? We could think about doing that same here, where, well, we don't have a send button, but just imagine that we had. I want to display all the information that they have filled in so far. And for now, let's just do that in the console. So we know that we could look over the list. So if we want to display all the values, we should loop. Let's go back to our loop. Or maybe let's do it for each, since for each is also a loop. So what if I want to console log the value that all of the inputs have? What would I need to change here? I'm doing this and I'm console logging the inputs themselves, but I want the values, only the values. Brianna? Input that value where? Here? In the console log. Because input is an object, it has a value property. Then we have John and 30. Any other questions?
So the question I just asked, you can do that with the array version of it.
Can I do this with the array version?
You were doing your input 0 equals hello.
Uh-huh.
What if you put the value
Oh.
input?
So the question now is, can I modify this 30 if I go to the inputs at index 1, that value equal 80? But wait, before we get to that, is there any, does this make sense? The fact that we're doing for each, and then we're saying, okay, for each input, console log that input value. We could have written this with a regular for loop as well. Let's do that one real quick. For here, inputs at index I, that value. We still get John and 30. So now the question was, okay, you have all the inputs. You cannot really modify the inputs itself, but can you modify the value that the input is holding? What do you all think? Thumbs up if you think yes, you can modify the value the input is holding if you have all the inputs in the list. Okay, and then thumbs down if you say no, because you couldn't modify an input itself and you couldn't replace an input with hello, therefore you cannot modify the value that the input is holding. Okay, there's some resistance, that's good. Cool, let's see. So we did inputs at 0. We did this, we saw that it didn't work. If we go inputs again, we see that the input is not hello, it's still the input name. Right? At index 0, we don't have hello. So this didn't work. But can we do this? Inputs at index 0. That value, let's do this. Okay, we get John. Because that's the first input, the one that's at index 0. The question is, can we change it? So this was the question, thumbs up and thumbs down. That's it. What happened? Change the value. Sure.
Declare the variable inputs in the query selector of all. Is that like making a copy, or is it like a reference to actual input?
It will be a reference.
So that's why you're able to change this?
Yes, because this is sort of a technical detail that you are not able to change the input itself. To change the input, we're going to see that we could use a special function called replace element. That will allow me to change the input. But we cannot change the input to just a string. We cannot replace an input with a string. But what we have is we have a reference to the input itself. And the input is an object. And the input is an object and it has a property called value. Then we can modify that value. It's like when you have an object and you declare it with const, and then let's say const apple is equal to an object with color and type or kind. You can still, even though you declare that object with const, you can still change the color of the apple. But you cannot change the apple itself to another apple. That will throw an error saying redefining const variable. So it's somewhat similar. You cannot change the input itself, but you can change properties inside of it. Any other questions here? Okay, so we saw Query Selector all and Query Selector. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Did you guys go over classes yesterday?
No.
It's a Query Selector and classes sound similar.
Yeah, it's just because the way you can grab elements in CSS is called with selectors, and those can be classes, IDs, even tag names. So yes, the Query Selector was inspired from CSS.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's all.
What's up?
All right, so now we go into VS Code, right?
Okay.
And I don't know where anything or how to open anything. Or...
It's still the same. It's still the same.
So wait,
Uh-huh.
when I try to say I try to open up.
Okay, yeah, that one might not work yet.
Okay.
So to do it like the code command, do Command Shift P. This is on a one-time only step.
Okay.
And then here type install code. Oh, but actually even before that, did you move this to the applications folder?
I don't think so. I think I
Okay.
just opened it up. It was like, because it happened in mid-lab, and I was like, oh my God, something needs to get done. So
Wait, let's go back here. Don't press anything. Just like escape or and then save this. And then just quit this. And I think you're gonna just save that as well. You don't want to do the changes. So then quit this. Great. You're getting the shortcuts. That's great.
yeah.
Now go to wherever you had VS Code before. Probably in the downloads folder.
It probably just downloaded it because I was frantic trying to get stuff done. Yeah.
Then what you need to do is just drag it to the application. Now it's truly installed.
Okay.
Now open it from here. And then we do Command Shift P. Remember that this is only one step, one time. And then type here install code. Yeah, this one, hit enter. Then that installed the code command. Now you can type code period and it's going to open the same as Atom.
Okay, all right.
That's it.
Thank you. Because I was just going crazy. Like, why is it? I see him doing it. I'm like, I can't do it. Oh, because it wasn't installed. Thank you.
Okay, let's keep going. So we were looking at the Query Selector all. Let's do paragraphs. This is just that code I was writing in the console, and that's a good playground. I want to just write it again here with inside my script tag in the HTML. So I'm going to do Query Selector all. And now instead of inputs, I have key tags. Nothing else has really changed. Let's do paragraphs, and let's loop over the paragraphs. Remember, the Query Selector all returns back to you with a node list. It's an array-like object. It's indexed. We could loop over it. So let's do paragraphs or for that I equals 0, I is less than paragraphs.length, I plus console.log paragraphs at index I that inner text. Actually, what if, yeah, let's do this. inner text. Let's go back to my website. Oh, actually, I have to open this one. So now I have this website. It's just a website with 2 paragraphs. We saw that if we console log paragraphs, we get that paragraphs is a node list, not really an array, and that we can loop over it. So let's open the inspector tools here. Inspector tools, developer tools, that's what this thing is called or known for. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to refresh, and then we see this. We see the console log in line 8, which is console log paragraphs. Again, we see the node list. We see that inside it has 2 p tags, right? And it looks like an array with square brackets. And then the loop is just going over this node list and console logging the inner text of every one. Right? Cool. Any questions here? Yes. Camille?
The open HTML tag, what's inside of it, the language.
Oh, we could ignore this for now. This is other attributes that you can specify for the browser to know what language your website is in, for instance. And then this dir is for the direction in which the browser should display your text. This is left to right, LTR. Yeah, but this, since we're in America for now, we could get rid of those. So the refresh, nothing really changed. Any other questions? These are attributes to the HTML tag, when and dir. Those?
If you changed LTR to RTL, would it mirror the text?
Oh, let's see. I don't know. RTL. Now the text appears right to left. So the difference was this. Oops. RTL versus LTR. Okay, any other questions not related to those? So, okay, we are logging in these numbers. So what we talked about a use case for Query Selector all, which is maybe like grabbing all the information that the user put in a form to display it as a summary. Maybe on that exercise of averaging the 3 numbers, you just get them all and loop over the inputs, doing an average. Wait.
You couldn't get the pop-ups to display the elements inside the node list. Is there a way to do it? Couldn't do it without value to get the pop-up. Is there a way to get the?
So you mean if I use window.alert here, and what do I want to display in that alert? Paragraphs of index I. So remember that what is paragraphs of index I? Is it a string, a number, an array, an object? What is paragraphs of index I going to be? If we see this is paragraphs. This is the paragraphs array. Right? What does the index 0 have? It has a P, but that P stands for a paragraph object. So this node list has the paragraph. If I do this, if I run this, I'm going to get an alert that tries to, JavaScript is like you're asking me to show this big ass element, I'm not going to do that. Right? And then I do okay. And then it still shows me the same.
So what if you put that inside the worker?
Let's do that inner text. This is my website. Thanks for visiting. What if I do, instead of inner text, I do value? I mean, undefined. When do we get undefined? In objects, when do we get undefined? Owen? When the property doesn't exist. That's it. Undefined, undefined. Paragraphs don't have a property value. Only inputs have a property value. Paragraphs have the content inside the paragraphs will be in that inner text. And remember again that in paragraphs we have an opening and a closing tag, and anything in between that will be inner text. When we have inputs, we don't have opening and closing. Therefore, an input doesn't have inner text. An input has value, not inner text, and the opposite is true for a paragraph. A paragraph has inner text and not value. Okay, so this is how we get that. Now, let's do this, and you're going to practice with this. I'm going to grab two images, maybe a car. Maybe this one. And then I'm going to get cat. Sure. Get this one. So instead of two paragraphs, I'm going to have two images, img, img. And I'm going to copy this. Let's see. Open image in a new tab. Get that image. Where do I put the URL for the image in the image tag? Source attribute. src equal and that. Remember that is an image tag a block element or an inline element? Inline element. Doesn't break the line, doesn't occupy the full width, and is it a self-closing tag or a non-self-closing tag? Self-closing tag. Therefore, this part doesn't go, just like that. Okay, let's do the next one. src equal. Now the cat picture. Paste that here. Remove the rest because an image is a self-closing tag. And let's load our website. Then we have two pictures. They are kind of big. Right. So here, what happens if I no longer want to grab the paragraph? I no longer have paragraphs. So I'm going to call these images, and I want to query select them via the image tag. So I get all the images. No longer going to console log it here. No longer going to alert. I want to do. Oh, this changes to images. Yes, I got rid of the paragraphs. Now, do you think an image has a value or an inner text? What do we think? Let's see, let's open up the console. Let's try do this. So we have the two images, just that they're big and I have to lower the zoom. So I'm refreshing and I should be looking at because I'm looking over the images, I should be looking, this should be showing me to something. Why isn't it doing that? Apparently not. Let's look at images. There was a node list, but it's empty. Douglas?
Is it because your query selector always aiming at P instead of ING?
Good catch. Query Selector is trying to grab paragraphs. There is no such thing in my website currently, so what I want to grab is images, ing. And refresh. Now I have console log. It says there's two console logs. That's what this 2 means here. And it says sample HTML at line 9. That's this console log. Okay. And I'm seeing nothing, just these 2 here. So what does that suggest about images? Do they have inner text? Right? They don't. Because, well, once they are self-closing, so they don't have anything like truly inside opening and closing time. What do you think? Is it going to have a value? Value? Inputs have value. I'm not sure if images have. Let's try. Oh, no, this one says undefined. Yes, I mean.
Why it was empty? What's the difference?
I'm thinking that images might have the property inner text, but it's just an empty string. If we look at this, let's do console.dir. To inspect one image. Oh. No. Oh, I'm not sure why I'm not seeing each one. I'm seeing the node list. But if we inspect in here, we see that the image that is at index 0 has all these properties. A bunch of them. It does have an inner text property. That inner text is just empty string. But it doesn't have, if we were looking for a value, we won't find it. There is no value property in the image. Okay, so now, what if I want to console log the width of these images? What can I do? Console logging the width. Jonathan? Just access the width property of an image. What? Oh. Let's see. Okay, so that's working. We're just seeing 2 zeros. So maybe it's not inner width. Maybe it is not width. Maybe it's something else. Yes, Douglas?
Is it dot source?
Dot source. You know what? Let's go back to inspecting what the image looks like. Oh, this is also the fact that I'm not seeing them individually is again the browser being. Oh, I don't know why now I did that. Okay, but it's showing me the HTML. I want the object. Okay, now it's doing it correctly. It's showing me 2 images. So let's inspect the images. And let's see width. it does have a height. That's good. Let's see if we find a width. It does have a width. Huh. So we have something fishy going on here. Let's try console log. Again, comment this one out. That width. We get 2 zeros. What about, let's go back here. I saw some other properties that might help us. Look at this one, client height and client width. Would that be the image itself or maybe the window size? Oh, this one is different. It's not the window because if it was the window, then both of them will be the same. The same client height and client width. So let's do client width. Let's refresh. Huh. This is something that is really, really unexpected. The thing is, the browser has to go to those URLs and grab the image. The thing is that our JavaScript is too fast. JavaScript will log the size of the image before the image even arrives. So this one is a tricky one. Say that again? Yeah, I don't really want to do that. Let's try this. I think that will even take some time. Let's save this image. Let's put a cat.png.
What if we set the height and width
In inline?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like styles equal.
So that will work. That's a good idea. So do you remember that we could set the property. I'm gonna break it down in multiple lines. We set the property height. Let's do width for now. We can set the property width to be 600, and let's just do the same for the other one. So now that our images have 2 attributes, source and width. Now, let's change this back to width. Let's refresh, and we get 600. We see it twice. But yeah, so we were looking at that 0 because the image takes some time to load, and it's just not. The image hasn't arrived when our JavaScript is trying to look at the width. Yes. What if I change one?
Yeah, that's gonna show.
Now we get 0. One is width 0, and the other one is width 600. Yes, Alexander. To delay like the JavaScript, yes, we could do that. I don't want to do it right now. So here, so the exercise here is, if you have this same thing in your file, is instead of console logging the width, because once you're building a website, you may not know how big those images are. But you may want all those images to be 600 pixels wide. But also, you don't want to set the width as the attribute in the image tag itself. Can we use JavaScript to guarantee to us that all the images will be of the same width. So here, if I refresh, we can see that the cat width is bigger than the car. So the question is, can we use JavaScript to, because we don't know what these images width are. Like, well, actually, we don't really know. Right? And I want to use JavaScript to ensure that both of them will be width 600 pixels. And I don't want to type width here. I want to use it. I want to do it with JavaScript. Let's take 5 minutes to do that. Talk to your neighbor, to your table, how we could achieve that. Yeah, I'm typing in here. So the question is, using JavaScript, change the width of all the images to have the same width. This is the question here.
That's always the problem. But do you understand it? Wait, what did you get? What did you Google? What did you find? Just tell me. And how would you implement that? Because that's basically what the question is. So you didn't really find the answer. You just got, you just found some syntax, basically. So you got to think about like what you can do to try not to say it. What you can do to affect each one. Yeah, but how would you change the width of all the images to have the same width?
Because we already selected all the images because we did the query selector all.
Okay. And then, so now we have all the images. So now what do we want to do with them? And how can we do that? Try it. What you guys thinking? Okay, did you guys try it out? Try it. Y'all gotta try stuff. That's when you see it failed, and then you look to see where it failed. And try again, and then try again.
How did it go over here? It worked? Cool. Try a really big number and then try a really small number. Hover over that. Your JavaScript program is trying to look for a variable called 30 pixels. You got it?
So then it becomes like hard because I'm like, well, this isn't even really
Okay. Hello, everyone. How did it go with the images? It went well? Okay, I'm really, really glad. Let's see it happening here. So what you had was this. What you were doing is just overwriting whatever width you had and setting it to a specific value. Some of you did this, string 100. Now I refresh. Now they are really tiny, 100 pixels wide. I think, what happens if I do pixels? Let's try it. Oh, now they're gone. So, apparently for the width of my images, I can only use, they will by default be pixels. That measurement will be taken in pixels. You don't need to include that. Would it take a number? Now we were pressing a string. Would it take a number? What do you guys think? Some nobbing, some still works. Let's try 600. Still works. So in here to the width, we can pass in either a string with a number or a number itself. Mm-hmm. Any questions with the images? Cool. So let's get to creating an element with JavaScript. So far, if we wanted to display anything in a website, like if we wanted to display, sort of going back to the paragraphs, or let's see if I have. So far we've been like modifying elements that are already in the page, right? We grab the element that's already in the page and we modify it somehow. We were grabbing images, we were grabbing paragraphs, etc., right? But everything that had to be there already. The thing is, we don't have to, not with this next tool that we're about to see, we don't need to have something pre-existent in the website. In fact, you could start with an empty website and fill it out with JavaScript, basically. Like create all the elements from JavaScript and fill out that website. In fact, that's what we're going to get to do once we're doing React. Give me 1 second. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Again. So, okay, going back to the paragraph. So let's have a paragraph here. Welcome to my website. And now I don't want to create another paragraph that says thank you for visiting. I don't want to do it in HTML. I want to do it in JavaScript. So sort of create the element first in JavaScript and then somehow put it in the DOM to display it to the user. So remember that so far we were grabbing elements that were already in the page, that were already in the DOM, and we were modifying those. Now let's create one from scratch with JavaScript. So let's do, we have this paragraph already. We're no longer going to need to loop. We're about to create an element from scratch and then put it in the DOM. Okay, so to create an element, you have another method in the document object called document.createElement. So I'm going to create a paragraph. So I'm going to call my variable p, just p. And I'm going to, I said there is some function that allows me to do that, which is in the document. So I do document.create element. So create element is just another function, another method, just like Query Selector, get element by ID, and one of those. We call it, we want to invoke it, and inside create element is expecting a tag name. What is expecting a tag name that will tell JavaScript what kind of element to create. So here I want to create a paragraph element, therefore I will use p. So again here, the create element function will expect a tag name to create an element of that kind, of that paragraph. Okay, so let's see this. Let's do console.log p. I only have these 2 lines of code. Creating a paragraph, and then I want to console log in. Let's see what we have. Go back to my browser, refresh my screen, and I see this console log. On line 7, my console log is console logging an empty paragraph. Right? Now, I don't want an empty paragraph, first of all. One is this, if we look at the source code here, that paragraph is not inside the body. At some point I want to put it inside the body. But before we even do that, let's put something inside the paragraph. Let's put some text inside. Just observe that this paragraph is not in the DOM yet. It's not in my website yet. You could think that this paragraph was created and is empty and is in the memory of my computer, but it's not on the page yet. Okay, so we can see that it's an empty paragraph. Right? How can we put something inside the paragraph? What were we doing when we wanted to console log the text of the paragraph? What property were we using for that? Suzanne? Inner text. Okay, so I know what I need, which is inner text. How could I set the inner text property of this paragraph? Douglas?
Dot inner text equals hello.
Or thank you for your visit. Just objects. If you haven't realized yet, once you do, that we're dealing, for the most part, with just objects, then your life will be much more easier. And I'm sure that all of you will get to that place. Once we realize and see that everything is just an object. P here is just an object. We're setting in the inner text property of the paragraph. Okay, now let's see what we have in the screen. I'm going to refresh. And we have now, instead of an empty paragraph, we have a paragraph with the text, "Thank you for your visit." Now let's console log the paragraph before we set inner text and after. sort of to see what's going on. Refresh. And we have both of them with the same text. Let's do dir or console log p.inner. Oh, so yeah. Chrome can be confusing sometimes, but be patient. So this is I was expecting here for Chrome to show me the empty paragraph and then the paragraph with the content. But because Chrome is showing me the HTML representation of that paragraph, somehow it's as if it was connected into like listening to changes that happen to that paragraph, and you will update both. So that is all to say that if we do p.inner text, I would hope we see it one is empty, and then once we have set it. Yes. So here we see it first, the p tag inner text is empty, then we put something by doing p.inner text, then we console log that. Great. So we created our first paragraph element. So this paragraph element it's only in the memory of our computer, but we're not showing it to the user yet. But the point of websites is to show stuff to the user, right? So the next thing that we need to do is to what is called appending the element to the DOM. For doing that, let's just remove these console logs. For doing that, we have a function called append child. And append child will be this function, document. Let's do document that append child. And then here, again, append child, just another function like get element by ID, create element. But now append child is expecting in a node, is expecting in an HTML element that we call nodes. In here, I'm going to pass p. I'm passing p to the append child method in the document. So here is appending p to the document. Now let's see what we have. Refresh the screen, and we have one of my favorites, an error. And what does that error say? Failed to execute append child on node. Only one element on document allowed. So this is the first time that you see this, and it's the first time that I see this. But we don't have to panic. So this is, if we look at their code, or if we look at, let's look at the DOM tree. This should make sense. This is the DOM tree. New tab. And then what is the only child of the document? Root element HTML. So this is Chrome telling me the document can only have one child. The document can only have one child. Now, how many childs have HTML? Two childs, the head and the body. Right? And the body can have an infinite number of childs. The head, I'm not sure. I think I will say the head probably can have an infinite number of childs. Or not infinite, but as long as you have memory in your computer. Okay, so but what I want to do, I don't want to append my p tag in the document. I want to append it in the body. So instead of saying document dot append child, I'm going to say document dot body dot append child. I'm going to call the append child not in the document itself, but in the body, which lives inside the document. Now let's try this. Oh, this is not the one. This one. So let's refresh. Now my paragraph will display. Yes, Peter?
Why would you want
A little bit louder.
this? Why would you want this?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, when you don't want to manually write an HTML document, because the other way will be I manually go in here and add a p tag. Thank you for your visit. Right. And but if my website is robust, I don't want to do that by hand. Programmers don't want to do anything by hand. And if you think about like the New York Times, all the big websites, they're not doing all that by hand, like writing HTML tags. They have a bunch of JavaScript that is pulling information from different places and creating these elements from within JavaScript. Any other questions here? Sure. You're saying it's not being shown in the body here? Oh, because I cannot append any. The document can only have one child. That's what the arrow said earlier. The document can only have one child, but the body can have many. And that leads me to the next point, which is to append a child, you need the parent and the child. So the parent here is body. So you need to the parent, or where do you want to append to? And then what do you want to append, which is the P tag. Cameron?
So you were saying that basically you write information much JavaScript that goes into the HTML, and you can see all that stuff there. So you don't really have to write that much HTML, just write a lot of JavaScript, right?
Yes.
So at one point, did people used to call JavaScript front end?
Yes, JavaScript was mostly front end at the beginning, yes.
Is that the reason why? Because
no, not really. It was because JavaScript ran only in the browser, and it was mostly for handling form submission and small animations. But then Node came, and then Node is JavaScript in the backend. Okay, so remember here that to append a child, you need the parent, and in the parent object, which is the body, you call the method append child, and you pass in the child that you want to append, in this case P. And if we look at it here, now we have the body has three things now. It has a P tag, it has a script, and it has, under the script, it has my new paragraph. Thank you for your visit. So what if I wanted to append my paragraph before the script? So, or what does this tell us about append child? Like the fact that it did P and then the script and then the other P. What does this tell us about append child? Joey? Correct. It will add as the last child. Sort of like when we're pushing to an array, we're pushing to the end. Similarly, append child will append at the end. In this case, having that script in the middle doesn't affect anything because that doesn't display anything. It's just a script. Okay, let's see if. Okay, now go if you still have the now that you still have the images, let's, instead of writing the images in the image tags in HTML, let's actually create those from JavaScript. The same way that we're creating a p tag here. So you had the images written in the image tag here. Now those two images, instead of creating them with the tags in HTML, create them with create element in JavaScript, and then append them to the body. So that at the end you should still see sort of the same website, which is with the two images that you have. Is that clear? Cool, let's take 5 minutes for that. Okay, how did it go with the images? Good, thumbs up? Great. So, let me show you here quickly. You could have an array with the image sources. Like sort of taking that a little bit further. Instead of you were create element and then passing in the image, and you were doing that manually, which is fine for now. But what if we have an array with the sources? Because that's the only thing that the two images really differ on, right? The source is different. But otherwise, you're still creating an image tag, you're still appending it to the body. So if we do this, oh, I should have not deleted my images. Here, I'm gonna have this array, image sources, and I paste in the first one. Let's see. That's the first image. The second element is going to be the second source, which was this one. Can you use a new tab? Oh no. Open image in the tab. Also, you know that you have a good image URL if your image link ends in .jpeg or .png or .gif, GIF, etc. That's how you know that you have a good image URL. So here, I'm going to paste that here. So I have my two images. Oh, this seems to be the same one. Let's copy this. Okay. So I have my two images. Now, this is an array. I want to loop over this array of sources, this array of URLs. And for each one, I want to create an image tag, an image element, and I want to append it to the document. So I could do the regular for, or I'm going to do that for source of image sources. So I'm going to loop, and for each one of them, what I want to do is create an image element, right? Let ing equal document dot create element ing. So I created my image. So far, I'm creating two images because I am looping 2 times. That's the elements that I have in my array, and I'm not doing anything with those images. So the first thing that I want to do is set the source to be equal to, let's change this to URL. That URL of image sources, URL. Set that image, I'm going to set that image, that source property to be equal to URL. URL will be one of these strings in my array. Then I could do, then the last step that I need to do is actually append it to the document. So let's see what we have here first. one. Where do I have my website? Okay, so this is what I have. My website still doesn't have the images. The last thing that I want to do is just append every image that I'm creating with this for loop to the body. So I'm going to do document dot body dot create element. No, not create element. Append child. And I'm going to pass in my image. So this should give me the result, the same result that you just get by creating the two images manually. I'm just not creating them manually, I'm putting the source, which is the only difference, in an array. Then for each one of those URLs, each one of those sources, I am going to create an element that's going to be an image. I'm going to set the image source to be that URL. And lastly, I'm just going to append that image to the document body. Now let's do that and let's refresh my page. Now my two images display. I created the two images from JavaScript using the create element, set their sources, and then append them to the body. How do we feel about this? Thumbs up, middle. Okay. So again, this is the same that you just did, which was create image 1 and image 2, create element for those images, and then set the individual sources for those images. I'm doing the same thing. It's just that I'm using the for loop here, so that in that case, I don't repeat myself, and I create an image for every URL that I have in my array. Any questions here? Josh?
Not really a question, but I shared on the Slack like how to create, for example, like large number of options. We have like 100 different options. You can easily create that by using like a JavaScript and using the append child.
Nice. That's worth checking out. Let's check this out quickly here. Create a new one, paste that, share.html. jr.html. Oh, so JR did here is, instead of, if he put a select box, and instead of creating all those options manually from 0 to 1 to 99, he has a loop going on from 0 to 99, and for each one of those, he's going to be creating an option, as we can see here. He has like appending. So first he creates a select box here. Same way we create an image, you can create a paragraph, you can create a form, an input, any element, basically. He's just creating a select here, and then he saves that to the select list, and then he appends the select list to the body. He console logs select list, and then from 0 to 99, this function will, not this function, this for loop will create an element of type option, set it to that option. Is going to set the value of that to be that one, to be the index, which will be 0 to 99, and the text will be 0 to 99 as well. Lastly, he says select list that append child option. Note here how we're not doing document.body.append child. That's because we don't want to append these options that are being created. We don't want to append them to the document. We want to append them to the select list. Let's look at this here. This is the select. This is what he creates when we do this. That's this select box here. Now, if we expand the select, we see all the options that were created dynamically. Let's look at what happens if I do this. Instead of appending to select list, I'm trying to go to append to the body. We're going to see what the difference will be here. Let's refresh this website and look at that. Now the select is empty and all the options are just there in the HTML. So I'm appending the options to the document body, but that might not be what I want. Right? Malik? In other words, the options should always be the children of the select list. Here I'm appending the options, but I'm appending them to the body. Options inside the body will be displayed like that. They are not part of the select because they are not inside of the select. So here, what I want is append to the select list. Fresh, I get my nice list. Yeah, sure.
So the difference in the code JR gave us and what we wrote is that this makes multiple elements a lot quicker than manually doing what we did.
Correct. Yes. We can with JavaScript we can create 100 elements like that. Okay, so we saw that in the last 10 minutes that we have. Let's see how can we remove the elements in case we want to remove an element. So going back to this one where we have the p tags. So we have this p tag. Welcome to my website. And for some reason, I want to remove it. I want to remove this p tag and just leave a blank page. Or who can give me a good use case for removing an element from a page? Like in the real world, when would you remove an element from a page? Yes. Yes.
Like deadline something and no longer it will take it down after that deadline text.
Okay, yeah, that's a good example. Like, what if this instead of welcome to my website says deadline or due on today's 12. So let's do on August 11. So this deadline doesn't apply anymore. I want to remove it. So for removing any element from the DOM, similar to appending a child, we need both the parent and what we want to remove. So we want to sort of having what do we want to remove and from where. So first is I'm going to get the paragraph with let p equal document dot query selector. I'm going to the paragraph doesn't have an ID, so I'm just going to grab it with by the tag name, which is just p. then I have what I want to remove. But where do I want to remove it from? So, like, what's the parent of the paragraph? The body, right? So I can do, so if I want to remove it from the body, I will do document.body.remove child. Remove that child. I want to remove the paragraph that I grabbed. So here is, where do you want to remove from? And what do you want to remove? You want to remove the paragraph. Let's try that. Refresh. Now there is nothing in the screen. The paragraph gets put there. It just happens so fast that we don't see it being removed. Let's see if I could. Even if I slow my CPU, still happens so fast. Okay. So also this, there are times where you may not know what the parent of the element is. Like if you have an element that is nested like deep inside divs, deep inside a form, and so on, you may not know who the parent is. So if you do body.remove child, and then you pass in the element, let's say, like, what if we have this div in here? So we just have the paragraph inside a div. Let's refresh this. You see, I refresh, and the element is not being removed. Why? Michael, I think we haven't heard from you. I'm trying to remove from the body, not from the div. Right? In this case, I'll need to do a query selector to grab the div and then say, okay, let div equal document query selector div. Then I can say div.remove child p. Now it truly removes it, because the remove child method needs to be called on the parent of the element where you want to remove. So I went in with query selector, and I grab that div, and then I just do div.remove child p. Any questions here? So you always need to append child, to remove child, you need the parent, and you want to call those methods in the parent, or where do you want to add or remove from? Add to or remove from. So, Shara is asking, could you do document.body.div? Let's try it. Doesn't work. This is because the body object doesn't have a div property. That's because the body can have many elements. In here, it doesn't know. If you have 1,000 divs, then it will not know which one you're referring to. So we better grab it with that. But now there's this other handy property in here that will allows not it will like we won't need to grab the div with the query selector, because every child keeps what is called a reference to the parent. So let's look at that if we do this. Console.dir P. So P has a special property. That property is parent node. So the parent node property of the P will be the div. Let's see this. Let's do console. On-cut error. Div is bad. You see? Now I'm console logging p.parent node, and when I see that, I have the div in here. So that's to say, all the childs keep a reference to their parents, and that's good. You know, it's good to know who your parents are, right? That still applies to HTML elements. So here, instead of having to grab the div, I could just do this. Parent node. Because we know that the p.parent node is a div, then we could do parent node that remove child p. The parent node of the p tag is the div itself. So we are, from this will be the div, and we're just calling that remove method in that div, and we want to remove the paragraph. Now we refresh, and we can see that indeed it removed the child. So those are two ways. One, using the query selector to grab the div, and other is taking advantage of the property, which is the parent will keep a property that refers to the parent. Yes, sure.
So p.parent node that removes child removes the div?
It doesn't remove the div, it removes the paragraph. See, the div is still here, but now you have an empty div.
Parent of p is the div.
So the parent of, yeah, the parent of the parent of P will be body. So we couldn't get to do the last one, which was replace elements. Therefore, we're gonna see that one tomorrow. First time that we, as we get here, and then we're gonna do the exit ticket and do with the rest of the class. So that's it for today. Thank you. Oh, I will be. I'm not sure if we'll meet here. Probably we'll meet here and then move there. I'll let you know on the slide if anything. Bye, Shana. Have a good night.
So, quick question.
You can have 3 paragraphs in the div.
Uh-huh.
Is there a way to tell, like, Query Selector to get the second one instead of the first?
Yes. Yeah, so the selector that you pass into Query Selector, as I said, is very flexible. There is a way in which you could pass a string that says grab the first one or the second one or the third one.
Figured it out.
Okay.
Every time you said grab, it kept reminding me of something.
Every time what?
Every time you said grab the element or the thing, it kept reminding me of something. When Trump said that, it kept reminding me.
I didn't. I haven't seen that.
Every time you said grab, that kept reminding me of that. Okay, now I was just playing around a little bit with CSS, but remember I told you just put everything as a string? But I'm still looping through the array. So my array holds just the URLs. So now it's a little bit cleaner.
Yeah. And then you just create.
It's inner HTML.
The problem with that, let's see. I think